think we're on. I don't see Derrick. He's probably getting more wine. Hi, everybody. There he is.
Oh, sorry. I need to get water because we're going to be drinking nothing but wine this entire time.
That is true. That is true.
And I had to make an entrance. As a sommelier, you got to make an entrance.
It was a good entrance. Yeah, you can never be early for your own party. I guess that's a party flaw by me. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Spain. I'm an ESPN radio host and TV personality and writer and a friend of Derrick's. And he suggested we get together with the world's heaviest pour and biggest glass and I guess solve racism. We're actually talking about, bigger pictures of allyship and how we keep this movement going and everything. But I decided to just call it solving racism with a heavy pour. I think that's the way we're going to see it. And I'm drinking this. It was in my house. It's a Nicholas Catena Zapata Mendoza from Argentina.
Ooh, fancy. So here's the deal. In my professional wine opinion, Sarah, you can only drink that with one pinky out. If you want the proper procedure, it must be, so.
But I have this giant glass. It's very heavy. I might need the pinky.
Well, you just do it one time so the people see it, and then the rest of the time you do it like this. This is the next official way.
Ooh, okay.
Like so, yeah. Oh, look at you. Oh, look at it. It's so nice. It's almost like you've had wine before and drank
couple times. What are you drinking?
So I'm drinking one of our guest wine, Theopolis Vineyards Petite Syrah. This is a 2013 version. I actually did a shameless plug. I actually did a samples, like a wine and music pairing with this wine, where we paired artists I really love, Leon Bridges' Sweeter, a record that just came out and kind of touches on this topic right now, with this wine that I fell in love with back in 2013, or a little bit after, and then it felt so relevant now, so I'm drinking.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk to Theodora, who is the founder of that winery, a little bit later. But let's kind of get into why we're here, which was you reaching out to me and sort of saying that it feels like a moment where white people like me are actually trying to educate ourselves and become invested in Black Lives Matter and sort of the civil unrest in our country in a way that feels different than before. And it certainly has felt different to me in a lot of meaningful ways. And yes. So we kind of wanted to bring the wine, which makes people more honest and comfortable.
Indeed.
Bring the heavy pour and engage with friends where we feel comfortable asking questions that maybe are a little bit unsure of, or that other people are thinking about but are scared to ask. And so that's kind of my goal. I'm going to be the guinea pig. I'm going to offer up questions and thoughts from people I've heard that are wondering and curious and thinking there might be mixed messages about how to best handle themselves now. So that's my role, is to offer up all the ways that white people are screwing things up or making things awkward, nailing it. And then you and our other wonderful guests are going to help kind of talk us through it and make sure that we're all coming together in meaningful ways.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I wanted to reach out to you, Sarah, is, I'm going to speak directly towards it, right? I'm just going to call it out right here. Is your platform and probably the circles that you run in look a little different than mine, as in it's probably more predominantly white. I imagine, especially in the sports sphere, definitely more male dominated, more white male dominated. And I think that, we've had these conversations in echo chambers, like me and I guess my Black friends have talked about, like, what's wrong, what's happening. But I've come to the realization of that there's two things that's happening. One is there needs to be a dialogue. Yes. And I know that you have to do the work yourself, but it is important for me to also help and assist and be the gentle hand correcting you. Yeah. And when I say you, I say the royal you as white people in general.
I think that's super important, though, because I think that's one of the mixed messages that we've already been getting, like this idea that there are Black people who want us to be reaching out and asking, how are you doing during all of this? And then there are Black people that are like, stop asking me how I'm doing and go do your own work and go educate yourselves. And so I think it's okay if you're coming from the right place. And as a woman who's had to try to engage people, especially in the sports world, on women's issues, there's a lot of times when you want to get real mad at people, like, where have you been? How are you just learning this? Why are you just learning this? But you also understand that if you want them to continue with the fight and join you, then that gentle hand correcting works a lot better than, I don't know, a bitch slap.
Yeah, I imagine, and I imagine there's a couple guys who are worse bitch slapping that you've come across.
Yeah. Most of the internet is actually that approach. But no, so hopefully we will be able to work through some of that. And in the meantime, we're also going to offer up some spaces that we think are worthy of your donations. So if you want to be here, which is great to engage and learn and conversate, but also help the people who are on the ground doing the work. There's one right there. Thank you to our producer / director, Steve. He's added a title to his many jobs. There's a couple places that we've vetted and think are really worthy of your efforts and your donations. Sometimes the people on the ground working the hardest and knowing the issues best are the best place to put your funds if you want to make sure they go to work. So those will kind of be important about.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into a little bit kind of preluding to what's coming is, the different steps we can take in order to creating change, how we can do it on a national scales, a lot like Black Lives Matter or BLM, and then doing it on a local scale with on the scroll now as you're seeing Asada's Daughters, who is local here in Chicago and a little bit closer to the issue as far as being local and touching it and seeing the people. And I think sometimes that money, in my opinion, can stretch in a different way that on a national level it just can't do because of the trickle down effect. And I think Theo, or one of the Theos, Dr. Foster, if you will probably get into that a little bit.
The good doctor who will be joining. So one of the things that you and I talked about was just the idea that right when George Floyd died and when the protests began, it was pretty easy to tell what space your friends and family were coming from, a lot of times based on social media posting, right? The concern over businesses, over lives was a big one early on, right? The fretting about what it looked like when the protests turned violent, which was understandable, but a very lacking understanding in the necessity sometimes for protests to take on the kind of weight and even violence in order to get attention. Right now, there's still tons of protests going on in Minneapolis, but because there aren't the shows of force from the police the same way, because there isn't the damage being done, we've all but stopped seeing them on the news, and that doesn't mean the issue's gone away at all. So I think that was a big, kind of eye-opening for me with a number of people I engage with, and also to teach myself the difference between sort of interlopers who are there to do bad things and are not affiliated with the cause, and those who recognize the necessity of being on the streets and making things uncomfortable because you can no longer just ask people very gently and kindly to care about whether you're living or dying.
Yeah, we're way past the thing I've always been thinking about is for a long time we've asked, right? We've pleaded and requested, and I think sometimes you need, for lack of a better word, violence, or you need action. You need something to shock the system in order to recognize, something's happening, right? It's the same thing with when we feel pain, right? Like when you feel pain, I coached Little League Baseball and I was pitching to the kids yesterday, and I woke up this morning and that soreness in my arm was a reminder, that I was old. And sometimes we need a reminder, this world is racist, right? Like the U.S. has systematic racism, and that pain of the violence and the rioting is an example of that. So
I would say that one of the things I'm hopeful about is that it feels different this time, in part because we're sort of skipping over the pleasantries of having to decide whether Black Lives Matter is right or not. There's still a faction of people that are always going to be all lives matter people who are intentionally being disingenuous about engaging in the conversation, and those people conversation for another time. But I think a lot of people who maybe early on would need to get that gentle introduction are past that point now, and we're diving right into, hey, did you know that for hundreds of years there have been principles in place and policies and laws in our country that have made it difficult for Black people to achieve generational wealth? Did you know about redlining? Do you know about, and the conversations that we're having are so much more advanced, and there's much more of an acceptance, I think, from white people that what we have as a country is not at all the ideal of what we actually believe ourselves to be. And I think disabusing ourselves of that notion is the first step, because until we agree all together that we're not really the land of the free and the home of the brave, that we aren't the ideal that the entire rest of the world looks up to, that we aren't doing everything perfectly. We never actually have, despite our ideas preaching it. Until we do that, we can't reimagine it. There's no reimagining of it if we think that we're actually pretty close to perfect. but we never have been. And I think so many more people are like jumping in on that way earlier than last time or the previous time we've had these conversations. And that's huge.
Yeah. And I think too, like for me, when I think about the things that I'm excited about, is the idea that because of that, because there are more ears and there are more eyes, there's more opportunities for, Black businesses and Black people to speak in a space that feels more free, right? I can speak with a certain resonance and I can speak with a certain confidence that that these things that I've known for forever aren't pushed to the side because now there's a heightened awareness. I really love that aspect. But because like coming from the South and growing up in the South and seeing this kind of tradition of the ebbs and flows of change, there is some nervousness on my part to think, well, like it feels different, but I feel like my parents thought it felt different. I felt like my grandparents thought it felt different. So there is this like tension where I'm not really sure, like, I don't really trust y'all, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
And I also think about like how patriarchy is tied into that. It's like, well, like there's things that I have to like, are people willing to do the work to think about, well, where does our privilege come from? Just as a cis male, thinking about where my privilege comes from and like how easy it is for me to put that down. So I think, I'm really excited and like I'm side-eyeing what's happening right now until we figure out if there's going to be something systematic or sustainable more so than systematic.
Right. I don't blame you for that. We just actually talked about the Washington football team on my radio show tonight and had someone from the Oneida Indian tribe. And we were like, are you hopeful this time? Does it feel different? And he's like, little different. We'll see. Because decades of having a racial slur as a name for a football team and everyone being like, you should change that. Like, okay, we'll get to that. I do think that what the key is all these different people and all these different forces coming together and saying, hold on. It's not fair that the country is run predominantly by straight white men who are building everything in their image and for their best interests. And once we all come together and say, hey, we're not going to be served until we're unified in our efforts to change the leadership in our country, then we're kind of, just treading water. And I think that's why we need to be much more bold and imaginative in the ways that we demand change instead of offering up tiny solutions for fear that we'll be shouted down for trying to change the status quo. At some point, like you said, it has to be a bit more disruptive so that people are forced to take bigger, more monumental actions that will actually change fundamentally flawed things like the education system or housing rights or things like that, that are maybe under the surface more than other things, but are actually deeply affecting the way that people of color are able to advance.
Yeah, and I also think about this top-down, bottom-up approach, right? Like, we need to change. Like, I remember Killer Mike was talking about, like, he was in Germany, and it was like, there's no statues of any Nazis in Germany, right? Like, we don't give statues to the people who lost. And so thinking about, like, those Confederate monuments and bringing those things down. And yes, that is a step, and very important step, because, like, images matter. Like, symbols do matter, but also not allowing that to be the red herring to like, oh, well, we're going to take these statues down, but
everything's fixed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like for me, what I find invigorating is that when you find people who are symbols and are doing the work. So like, for instance, like if there was a Black woman winemaker who was also a lawyer, who is fantastic, who is a symbol,
build
but
her a
also
statue.
right. Like, why does she not have a statue? Like, she's more relevant to like changing culture and creating like something that's systematic and beautiful and important. Like, why not talk about that? And why not we think about those things as images, right? Like, that is an image that actually resonates with more people than a Confederate general who lost. Like, why are we connecting ourselves to losers? Like, I don't understand that.
Why don't we talk to that lady that you just brought up? I feel like we have access to someone who's just that amazing.
I wonder who.
Oh God, you guys are making me laugh. I'm in Texas where it's 98 degrees. Okay.
Oh man. Theodora, so happy to have you here. Badass winemaker and lawyer, trial lawyer. I mean, hello. Bringing it. I'm come from a family of lawyers, and even I will not engage in any debate that I might lose to you. I think you're bringing too much skill there. Let's start with the wines. Let's start with Theopolis Vineyards. I know you could go on forever, but give us a little taste of what you're doing over there.
Well, we are making handcrafted award-winning wines in the Yorkville Highlands of Anderson Valley, Mendocino County, California. I grow my Petit Syrah, and my friend has a bottle of my Petit Syrah that he is drinking, the 2013 Petit Syrah that's only available to wine club members.
Ooh,
and it is best in class. I really planted that. I'm a girl from Texas. I happen to be in Texas. I planted my vineyard in 2003, had my first harvest in 2006. I was happy to be a lawyer, vintner, selling my grapes to award-winning wineries, not planting the bottle wine. In 2012, I delivered those grapes to a buyer. He rejected them because I had to pick in the rain. So I was forced to bottle wine in 2014 based on my 2020 vintage. And I've been bottling wine ever since, and I love it.
Yay.
But I still practice law, and I still try cases for my clients. And I have to tell you, like you guys were talking, this has been a change. I represent employers. I help companies deal with these issues in the workplace. And we are getting so many requests to have this conversation. This is unheard of. We have not had that kind of outreach from corporate America to have the difficult conversations. And these are difficult conversations, but they're having it because if you don't have the conversation, you're not going to change anything. So I too, like Derrick, feel that we have an opportunity. This is a springboard for real change.
Mm-hmm.
So, Theodora, you talk about this being a springboard for change and those opportunities arising. So, have you seen, you being winemaker, me, myself being sommelier, have you seen wine as being a connector for people thus far and as an integral part of being a connector? And then what do you think were some of the barriers of entry for you becoming a winemaker? Give us a little background on like what was difficult and rewarding about that.
Well, let me put it like it's still difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I only produce 800 cases annually, which makes me a very small producer. I won't say race is the definitive issue, but I will say being a small handcrafted winery makes it difficult for me because distributors don't want to deal with me because I don't have enough product. But I don't have the financial resources to be a Kendall Jackson.
Right.
So what money in this business is king. As they say, if you want to make money in the wine business, start with $1 billion and end with $1 million.
Yeah.
It is real. And I am my own financial support. I don't have business partners, which makes it very difficult. That's why I will still be practicing law for a long, long time.
Wait, Theodora, yeah, I want to ask you because as a woman, whenever I say I work for ESPN, people say, "Oh, do you like sports?" Which is like the dumbest question you could ask someone who works. So I'm curious, what are people less likely to believe you when you say, "I am a trial lawyer" or "I am a vintner"?
Actually, being a vintner, because I hate to say it, Black people, we're advocates. We've been advocating civil rights for years. We've got Thurgood Marshall as an example. They can believe that I'm a trial lawyer. But when I go to a trade show, producing my wines and trying to support those wines to get in a Beverages or More or some retail shop, they were like, "Who are you?" And they can't believe that I am the owner and founder of Theophilus Vineyards. But I will tell you, with the Black Lives Matter movement, I have had more outreach than ever. Okay?
Wow.
Literally, I have had people reaching out from me, all kinds of retail establishments, restaurants across the country, and I have to rise to that occasion.
Love
So
that.
I've got to get a lot of different licenses. As Derrick knows, I'm licensed in Illinois. I've had a following in Illinois, and I can self-distribute in Illinois. But there's a lot of states. And so we are wrapping up our production, and I still sell my grapes. So I will likely be selling less of my grapes going forward in order to meet the demand. It has been incredible, the support that we have had. And we got to keep this going. So if you like our wines, tell people, go to social
Follow.
media.
I just
Follow
Yeah, hit the Instagram.
followed it.
Okay, on Instagram at Theopolis Vineyards. If you are on Twitter, you go to Theopolis V. Facebook, Theopolis Vineyard without the S. I mean, we are so excited about this opportunity, but social justice is something that we have to work together. And one of the things that I feel compelled to do as a lawyer and a vintner is to build bridges, to have those difficult conversations. And quite frankly, one of the things that I do as a lawyer is I go into the C-suite and I train those corporate executives about implicit bias. Don't fool yourself. We all have bias. And until you look at yourself in the mirror and realize that you have bias and are willing to work to change that, we cannot change the conversation and we cannot change racism in America.
Let me just add to that quickly. There's a really interesting, not fully proven, so don't take it all as 100%, but at Harvard University, it's called Project Implicit. If you search Project Implicit on Google, you can take tests that apply to a variety of things and will tell you whether subconsciously, not even noticing it, you might have a bias against Black people, Latin people, women, homosexuals. You can pick from a wide array of things, and it's the speed at which you answer questions and associate one word with another or one name with another that will tell you whether your brain, even if you don't realize it's doing it, is been conditioned by society to believe certain things about certain people. And the awareness of it is what then allows you to counteract those societal conditionings and change them. But you first have to recognize you have them.
Absolutely.
So
and
wait,
in fact, I'm not putting a plug for my law firm, but Littler Mickelson, we required every shareholder at the shareholder retreat to do that Harvard study.
Love it. Awesome.
Wait, here's the question.
5 years ago.
Do they have a Harvard study for wine bias, like red versus white versus? Because I would really like that one.
Yeah, like is there one just for boxed wine? That's my favorite.
I think there's a new movement for you there that can be even more profitable.
Derrick, get in on that, man.
Hey, well, I may need someone to help litigate the issue when we
draw
try
up
to
the papers, set up the contract.
I might need some assistance. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, Theodora, about giving you more business, but it sounds like you're overwhelmed. So we will continue.
No.
Social media.
You never have enough business. You build it.
Yes, Sarah.
Okay.
Right now, I have my wine daughter and 2 neighbors. I'm in Dallas taking care of my 94-year-old mother, but I have my wine daughter and 2 neighbors in Oakland, California, packing and shipping as we speak. Because we cannot let this momentum die, and we've got to provide excellent customer service. Because I never want anyone to say that I bought from a Black winery, but they did not provide me customer service. They took 2 weeks to get my order. We want you to get your order within a week if you're on the East Coast, and within 2 days if you're on the West Coast. Customer service is very important. So we love our customers, we love what we're doing, and we love making a difference in this world.
Love it.
So really quick question, Theodora. You talked about this, but in addition to following you, what are some ways that you think that people can support, Black, specifically women and Black winemakers and wineries? The second follow-up question is how can we buy from you? Is there a way that if, in Illinois, I know how to get the wine, right? If anyone's in Illinois, they just got to come find me, right?
Derrick,
and I can get you.
Absolutely.
Derrick,
I'm the plug. But in other places, not in Illinois, how can they find your wine? How can they ask for your wine? What do we go to the wine club? Can you talk about that really quickly for us?
There's 3 things that I would recommend to support not just Theopolis Vineyards, but all Black wineries. Join our wine clubs, because that is something that's consistent. We can determine what our future production is if we know we've got 500 wine club members. If we have 100 wine club members, we're going to produce less wine. That's number 1. Number 2, you can go to our website We are set up to ship throughout the United States. We have set in place all of a plug for Vito Shipper. I will tell you, they have helped me be able to ship in all of the states. So go to AnnapolisVineyards.com and you can buy our wines. But most of all, what you should do, you go to a wine shop, local. I believe in local wine shops, just like Derrick has. Tell them what you want. Tell them you will buy the wine if they put it on the shelf. Because less than 1% of the wines in retail shops are owned by people of color or African Americans. And the only way we can change that is you demand that they carry our wines.
Okay, this is an action item that we're going to bring up later. We're adding this to our action item list, which is to find out about Black-owned wineries and wines that you like and take them to the store and demand that they carry them. I love when things are actionable and actually pretty easy, which is just walking in and telling people I like. And most white people are great at doing that. I mean, I can't tell you how good we are.
Karen the shit out of this.
I'm going to Karen the shit out of this wine. I'm going to film it and put it on the internet. I'm going to go viral asking for Theopolis wines at all places of business.
I love it.
Theodora, you're amazing. We're going to bring you back in a little bit. We're going to trade you out for another Theo because we want to keep things as confusing as possible around here. And we want everyone to have the same name. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Let's bring in the other Theo. We're going to actually call him Theo just to keep things interesting, even though she said she does not miss Theo. And now I'm making it more confusing. All right, here we go.
Or AKA Dr. Foster. Dr. Foster, if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, all that jazz. Or, or you could just let the scroll do it for us.
Right, read it.
Yo, as a matter of fact, I think though Dr. Foster, he's a man of many words, so he might have quieted himself because he's probably arguing with us. So he'll probably unmute himself and tell us all about who he is in a second.
Oh no, we still have no audio on Dr. Foster.
I think he's.
Oh wow!
There it is.
I guess they're just giving out doctorates these days to people who don't even know how to use the mute button.
It's going to be a rough fall semester for these students here at University of Louisiana Lafayette with my online education. So first, I'd like to thank both Sarah and Derrick for starting us off with a really, engaging conversation. I feel very welcome in this space and appreciate Theodora getting some shine and her wine. I'm breaking the mold, I think, and drinking some whiskey and Coke, which has been my main go-to drink for the...
Well, we did decide we could call it Think and Drink, and you're drinking something, so we're good.
And we're thinking collectively. So I'd like to lead with a quote from a dear professor of African American Studies at Princeton, Imani Perry, a woman of many books. She published 3 last year, which is unprecedented in my world. But she says, the world is very complicated, and I think it's helpful to work to understand it in community and in spaces that allow for vulnerability and fallibility, right? And I don't think we have enough of those spaces in this moment or in general. And I think, this space should be and already feels, a space where we can be honest with one another, think and drink with one another, and hopefully, transform so we can, do that work in our local places. So my name is Theo Foster. I learned before we began that Theodora and I share grandfathers with the same name. My name is Theodore Roosevelt Foster III.
Whoa.
And Theodora's grandfather is also Theodore Roosevelt Lee Sr.
Whoa.
Right? So where in the world did these 2 Black families develop a desire for the lovely name of Theodore Roosevelt, a statue that's being removed?
I was going to say, are we removing your middle names right now?
Roosevelt. Actually, if you look at my ID, the woman at the DMV in Alabama couldn't spell Roosevelt, which comes with 2 O's. She spelled it Rosevelt. So, we're still working through that.
Yikes.
And learning.
America.
However, the university we attended together in Alabama does know how to spell Roosevelt properly. So just to let you know, where we got our education together and the university, that university, knows what they're doing. You know what I mean? And it wasn't the football playing ones because, they don't really educate the way we do.
Wow. Shots fired at the DMV and Alabama in just like the first 2 minutes here.
That's how I come out the gate.
Yeah, I don't have anything in Alabama to defend, so I'm fine. Go for it.
No, Derrick and I went to school together at UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. I remember him sitting in the front row, which is a very smart move as an educator. If you sit in the front row, statistically, you're going to do way better than everybody else. And Derrick did in a class of like 300 in a very basic math class, finite mathematics. I do remember your voice back freshman year of 2000.
Okay, so Derrick was a kiss ass, not surprising. Okay, that's why you end up on the Wine Enthusiast 40 under 40. Is first of all, right up front.
Some things never change. Some things never change.
Wait, so Dr. Foster, I want to say something quickly to the quote that you said because I think it's really important, but I'm kind of torn on it. So the fallibility part, I think, is really important. And this woman, Glennon Doyle, just wrote a book called Untamed. She had a whole chapter on racism that I posted to my Facebook. I think it was a probably violation of copyright, but whatever. And I took a picture page by page. And the part that stood out to me the most was this idea that like white women, particularly white women who believe themselves to be on the right side of things, are so used to being praised for their good choices that when they screw up or they're not educated enough on something and they get pushed back on or yelled at or treated badly because of that, they shut down and stop fighting, or they just move on. And I'll say, for instance, like personally, I had some issues with Dave Chappelle's latest special, not about the Black Lives Matter stuff, but that I thought it needed to be more inclusionary, and that his issues with trans people in the past and continued issues make it really difficult to fight on behalf of marginalized people if you're going to exclude certain parts of that marginalized group. And when I said that, I felt the fallibility because a lot of people did not want to hear a white woman criticize a black man speaking from the heart on an issue that's so raw. And I got that after the fact, and I learned from it, and I'm going to keep fighting. But I'll tell you that it took a lot of strength for me to have 3 days in a row of just straight, you're the worst, you're doing what everyone else is, typical white woman doing whatever. So can you sort of speak to, like, I don't know, it's complicated because we're going to screw up if we're trying our best to have uncomfortable conversations because they're uncomfortable because we don't know how to have them.
100%.
And it's a structural problem that produces a lack of political education. That is something that, formerly I worked for the university, but I've also long-term as an organizer and activist supported the practice of political education. So I think a lot of what you and Derrick were talking about before and the context you just brought up in particular brings up a watered down term of intersectionality, right? Which seeks to understand how power intersects and how we identify with one another in relation to power. So I think that's one thing I want to start off top. And if we understand intersectionality to be complex, then we know that how it cuts you as white woman is different than it cuts Dave Chappelle, who I share a birthday with. I was born August 24th, 1987. He was born a previous year.
Oh, you were almost a Leo. I'm so sorry you missed out on being the best.
Pause. I'm an August Virgo, okay? I'm a cusp, so I got a little Leo in me, but I'm definitely very Virgo.
Some of us are real lions. It's fine.
Yes, I'll real lions. But no, the intersection of patriarchy and racism is very real. I think you're right to criticize Chappelle. I used to be a super fan. If you went to my bedroom for the past 9 years, you'd see a huge poster from when I used to work at the movie theater of Block Party 2004.
Yeah.
Still a movie that I love, done by Michel Gondry, a brilliant French director who did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
But the way Dave Chappelle has evolved over time is not with the progressive demand for including all Black lives, including Black trans people. His usage of the term tranny is a slur within LGBTQIA plus communities that is in many ways, forgivable in the context of recognizing that harm caused. And I have yet to see that Chappelle, other very popular mainstream, comedians like Kevin Hart have also transgressed. And I don't think, it's one thing to hold space for people to be vulnerable. It's another to demand accountability. And I think that's what cancel culture is really about. I don't think cancel culture is a thing. I think, cancel culture is when the NAACP was banned from Alabama in 1954, right? Like that's cancel culture. Like, you really want to think about who's canceled. Colin Kaepernick has been canceled thoroughly.
Right. That's a bar.
People who push back on cancel culture are usually just trying to protect people who are trying to be held accountable, and they're not used to being held accountable, so they call it canceling, when most of them keep their jobs and their money and their status.
Yeah. And I often find that a lot of times people push back on cancel culture because they're worried about some shit that they did, and they like, look, I don't want you to get, and they don't want to do the work now to like not necessarily rectify, but acknowledge those transgressions and try to move forward. They want to say, don't judge me on what happened, even though I have not changed or acted differently. You just won't hear it now. I used to say it loudly in the past, but now I'm going to say it quietly in rooms where you're not in.
That's also the problem with today is that because we're so dug in our heels to one side or the other, like literally a word can trigger whether we're supposed to agree with what someone's saying or not based on their use of a specific word, that we're unwilling to admit a wrong first so then we can admit a change. And so people who are operating in bad faith are looking to expose hypocrisy because they have no intention of changing. Whereas people who have genuinely evolved and changed over time can look back and say, yeah, I did say that 11 years ago, and I've learned a lot about that culture, and I feel awful about it. So call me out on it, and I'll tell you I'm different. Are you different? Or are you just calling me out because you want someone to join you in being on the wrong side of things? And that is like, it stops us from having real conversations.
I couldn't agree more. I think you painted the texture that we feel when those debates come up about canceling beautifully. And I think, there's a history that is untold when people evoke that today that we should recognize in terms of the language, the dog whistles or bullhorns that we're coming to understand in this moment. As a Black studies scholar, as a Black historian, and someone wanting to speak to the intersection of patriarchy and racism, there is a historical precedent that I think is relevant for this moment. And in particular, thinking about someone both of you I'm sure know, in Centolia Brown, who was, sexually assaulted, abused, and killed her, the person who paid money to sleep with her and under brutal conditions of exploitation. We are familiar with the case of Dred Scott in 1857, a Black enslaved man who fled to the North, and the Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution didn't rule that Black folk were citizens, therefore he is not a human, he is not a citizen, therefore, even if you are in the North and you are formerly enslaved, you can be re-enslaved, right? Yeah. Prior to that 2 years is a Black woman named Celia, who was 19 years old and lived in Missouri. I'm gonna read a brief excerpt from an article I'll share for folk that I think is really important because it gets to a organization today that I've been supporting as someone who identifies as an abolitionist. I think that, cancel culture often thinks of like negative and deconstructive and not building up. I think the demand for abolishing police and prisons is a demand for transformative justice that would allow for the kind of accountability that we are seeking in individuals like Chappelle or Hart or those who transgress. Not to say that they don't deserve to be accounted for, but that the logic of punishment is one that is a beast, that is the inheritance of slavery. So Celia, on June 23rd, 1855, after enduring 5 years of sexual violence as a 19-year-old Missouri enslaved woman, killed her master, Robert Newsom. Newsom was a 60-year-old widower who had purchased Celia when she was 14 years old. On the day of her purchase, he raped her on the way to his farm. Sexual control of enslaved women by white owners was critical to the perpetuation of slavery, and these owners relied on routine sexual abuse as much as they did other forms of brutality. By the time she killed Newsom, Celia already had 2 of his children and was pregnant with a 3rd. She started a relationship with one of Newsom's male slaves, George, who insisted that she end her sexual relationship with Newsom if they were going to continue theirs. Celia approached Newsom's daughters and implored them to ask their father to end the sexual assaults, but no one could protect her. So she confronted Newsom herself when he came to force yet another unwanted sexual encounter. She clubbed him to death, then burned his body in the fireplace. While she went on trial, and while there was a Missouri state law that said if someone is defending themselves, they deserve to be heard, much like the stand your ground law of Florida, but we know that applies differently. Celia was not considered a person under the law and could therefore not be raped. She did not have enough agency to be judged a murderess and punished for her act of resistance. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. After an appeal of the case failed, Celia was hanged on the 21st of December, 1855. So my point in bringing up this history, as triggering as it is for those who are survivors of sexual violence, apologies for not bringing that in earlier. I think it's important to think about in relation to how we, center someone like Dred Scott, center the lives of Black men like Michael Brown, Rashard Brooks, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling. We could go on and on and on and on, often to the exclusion of Black women. We're familiar with the hashtag Say Her Name, Breonna Taylor, but Corinne Gaines, Renisha McBride in Detroit,
Sandra Bland.
Sandra Bland in Texas, right? Aisha Stanley Jones in Detroit, 7 years old, shot. So, I think there's a way in which this moment of accountability requires those of us who identify as cis Black men, like Dave Chappelle, to acknowledge what power is imbued in that intersection of identity and what's not, right? So the 1846 special I have not watched, in part because of that, but in part because of the previous special in which he was quite transgressive and without accountability to trans communities. So that's, a bit of Theo's rant. I'll shut up now to listen to folks, engage. We wanted to center Celia and this organization Survive and Punish because
Derrick, go ahead. Let's do some speed round quickly, if that's possible. And I don't think it is with someone who has doctor in front of their name, but let's see if he can disprove that theory.
First of all, I told y'all, Theo, you got to do. You want to clear out. You want to Kobe clear out. Clear out. Let him work. So really quickly, if you could, in sound bite form, can you tell us, looking at what's happening on this movement, can you talk or speak to how this is similar or dissimilar to the Me Too movement? What we can draw from that, and or what we can learn from that and use and going in a different direction.
Very good question.
30 seconds or less. No, I'm joking.
I think that we should center the founder of Me Too. Her name is leaving me right this moment.
Tarana Burke,
who is a Black woman, survivor of sexual assault, who often is absent. And when we bring up Me Too, it's like, well, why was a Black woman centering this problem? I think the intersection of racism and sexism, patriarchy, misogyny is very much so at root. So I can't disconnect the Me Too movement, which she founded like in 2007, right? Like it only became a hashtag after the visible misogyny of a white man and Donald Trump. So we should recognize.
Or Amber Rose speaking out against Harvey Weinstein. You can't erase the white woman being the victim from the power of the Me Too movement taking off, which is why it's hard to compare.
Taking off is a viral meme, right? Yeah. Which is to say that Black Lives Matter is also a viral meme that isn't addressed to white people. As Black folk, we know that Black lives matter. So when we demand Black Lives Matter, it's a baseline recognition that has yet to be afforded Black folk in terms of humanity. So I think the Me Too movement seeks to humanize women.
I figured it out. It's Rachel Dolezal. So if you can have a white woman be the center of your Black movement, then you're fine. You just need people to care about her because she's white. Wow. Okay.
Clear out for Sarah now. Sarah, work. You got what you want. You want on the block? We got it to you on the block.
No, it's true though. And I had Eddie Glaude from Princeton, the chair of African American Studies, in my pod, and he said the same thing. I asked, "What can we learn from Me Too? How did that take off? Like it felt like women were saying this forever and ever and ever, and it finally picked up." And he said some very smart, thoughtful things, and then at the end he said, "But it was also white women asking you to care about them, and that's pretty easy to do. It's not the same for Black women. That's why intersectionality and feminism is such a problem as well." Okay, there's so much more we could do on that, but really quickly, can you, again, 30 seconds or less, no pressure, talk about how we can make sure that this particular moment in history is one after which we can say we took advantage and we didn't let it slip from our grasp like any other time when we were really engaged in this topic?
Really quickly, and I'll read a quote second to reach back to the last moment we had this unprecedented uprising and rebellion in the 1960s. I think that we should prepare for a white retrenchment, which is to say, after the Civil War, we had Black Reconstruction for about 12 years, which was the only effort at a truly multiracial democracy. That was curtailed in 1877. And the wake of that is the rise of Jim Crow, the rise of segregation, the reimposition of white control. And I think that our look back to the civil rights movement is often a mythical fable of American narrative that misrepresents the reality that the majority of white folk and a good majority of Black folk were not active participants in the civil rights movement and actually were critical of something okay.
Yeah.
An author I love.
So is that like everyone looking back in 20 years saying, "Oh, I was at the march for George Floyd," and half of them was inside?
100%. It's also it's a historical precedent that it's basically 2 steps forward, 1 step backlash. As soon as you make massive civil rights movements, whether it's for LGBTQ people or Black people or women, you can expect that the ruling class, which is essentially the white patriarchy, is going to push back on the idea that they're losing their rights by giving other people rights. And so it's Trump. the
Yeah,
story
it's
is written.
It's
already happening. To your point, Dr. Foster, I'm sure it will. God, I hope it doesn't happen more in that specific way. But the stories written about that election essentially laid out for us how it was almost inevitable that all of the things that had been moved forward when it comes to the rights of women and people of color and LGBTQ people would ultimately result in a scurrying about of fear-based rhetoric that would cause standard old ass white people to be like, oh no, we're going to lose all of our jobs, safety, women, etc. And it resulted in the presidency.
And that's horribly important. I think that was a beautiful contextualization. I think we forget the post-civil rights retrenchment moment in which you have conservatives on the right promoting colorblindness, I don't see color, and you have liberals on the left saying multicultural democracy, we believe in everyone, but only certain belatedly black and brown people can come included. If you got a degree,
right?
Much like the DACA context, there are a lot of undocumented people who deserve rights as citizens, who aren't not criminals, who aren't college graduates, right? Jean Theo Harris, white woman, Armenian descent, out of Brooklyn College, wrote a beautiful book called A More Beautiful and Terrible History, The Uses and Misuses of Civil Rights History. I think it's an important read for white folk, especially as we're reading The White Fragility.
Writing it down, white people, yeah. a more beautiful and
terrible history.
Yeah, black people write that down.
Right, okay, everybody, all people write it down.
Yes, The Uses and Misuses of Civil Rights History. It was published like 3 or 4 years ago, so it's fresh. But Jean Theo Harris writes, and I'll just read one quick quote, showing white people in a largely flattering light, they framed black people as undeserving of full rights and as being responsible for their own problems, thus necessitating an end to the changes of Reconstruction. W.E.B. Du Bois, in his 1935 classic, Black Reconstruction in America, referred to these stories as the, quote, propaganda of history, for giving us a false but pleasurable sense of accomplishment. That's what the civil rights movement often provides us. And it's a mishistory and misreading of the toll that people like behind me, John Carlos and Tommy Smith, right, suffered greatly for this iconic image of their fists in the air at the 1968 Olympics. We often overlook the fact that Rosa Parks had to flee to Detroit for employment after sitting on that bus and organizing because she was identified as a troublemaker. And the consequences of that resulted in her, husband developing alcoholism and cirrhosis of the liver. There are real life consequences for this action. So I think that when we think about donating, when we think about doing the work, we think about those who are suffering. Even Ferguson, there are activists from 5 years ago who are no longer with us today. Right? Yeah. Because of stress, because of depression, because of specific targeting, right? Yeah. So I think, this moment demands a lot of us to continue that work, is to recognize that there are going to be lulls and moments where people aren't in the street. So what are you doing in your own institution, in radio and journalism, in the wine industry and education, to support those people who are always going to be on the front line and suffering, right? Legitimately, like labor laws, right? And or under COVID, all these protesters, wow, I am concerned.
Yeah,
about
you really brought that around to like the whole fucking 2020 shit. Yeah. Quick anecdote: the Japanese arcade parks, not arcade parks. What's it called when you go on roller coasters? Theme parks. Thank you, brain.
Theme parks, yeah.
Japanese. This wine's great. The Japanese theme parks have asked that people not scream on the roller coasters because of the spread of COVID. So they asked you to just scream internally within your heart, and that has now been labeled the tagline for 2020. Scream internally within your heart. That just sums up everything you just presented all at once.
That sounds like harm reduction.
Including rights while opening yourself up to a pandemic. Okay, we're behind, not surprisingly, because race doesn't solve itself fast. Why don't we just keep Dr. Foster here for a minute? Derrick, why don't you give us something that you want to reflect on, or an action, or not an action item? We'll get to that, but something you want to reflect on or dive into deeper after this because of something we talked about.
Yeah, I think that for me, the thing I've become or continually be made aware of is, recognizing my own privilege and finding that out and seeing that within the spaces that I live, move, and breathe, and addressing that head on. I think, again, being as a straight cis male, like, what are those levels of privilege? The other thing I've come to realize too is there has to be a point where I one, create a space. I allow myself when I have the energy to create space for people to give that gentle touch. And then I think for me personally, I'll put myself on the couch, right? My therapist will love this, is that I too have to become comfortable with other people's discomfort. I am black, I am here, and I may make you uncomfortable. And guess what? I don't care. Like, as a matter of fact, maybe I lean into that discomfort a little bit more because it gives me joy. And realizing that just like everyone else, just how privilege creates space for other people, I need to create my own space in this.
Let me ask you a question about that, because here's the thing. What's difficult about that is when it causes you monetary or status issues. So as a black man who's a sommelier and a wine culture creator and 40 under 40 and doing big things, when you walk into a space that's predominantly white, I don't know that you will say, I don't care if me being black will make you uncomfortable. You'll probably code change in a way that makes them feel more comfortable. And I don't blame you for that. So how do we solve that issue of like, you also shouldn't be held back or limited because the only way for you to be yourself would be for other people to hold that again. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if code changing helps you do the things that you need to do, I can't judge you for that.
Right. Yeah. There are coping mechanisms that I use, right? There are mechanisms that I use as a black male to make myself feel safe and to make the other people around me feel safe, right? And I think that for me, right, it is important, and this may get in a little bit into allyship, is what's important for me for allies is to stand in those spaces where I cannot go, right?
Yeah.
To speak, to show, to be in those areas, to speak for me where I don't have a voice. My job is to speak for women in a space where women are not allowed or their voices aren't heard. And even to, just like some people have done, remove myself from places of power and say, look, I don't need to be here because there should be someone else here should be in this place. So those are kind of some of the things that I've and it is also in the same way that, you know, like white people should do the work, I also should be doing the work on myself and finding out and thinking of ways to talk, think, be, and do. And I think, you know, circling back and wrapping this all up is, I think one important thing that I found is, you know, focusing on my mental health, realizing that as being a black person of color, as being an oppressed person in this America, I've gone through trauma, and not running away from that trauma, not running away from that fact, but sitting in that, dealing with that, and working through that allows me to be comfortable and to be able to walk in those spaces and be confident and comfortable in those spaces.
Yeah.
Dr. Foster, you may have some, you know, a smarter, or you may be able to surmise what I'm saying or understand in a better way. But does that are the things that I'm saying, does those things make sense or what have you?
Very much so. I think that we need to, you know, do our best in real time to recognize when we have, you know, not done the work that we want to do. And in front of those people to, you know, in moments where it's appropriate, call out and call in. I think that there's a value to calling out, and I think there's a value to calling in, and not everybody has to do that kind of work. So I think the optics of a white woman calling out a black man can look bad, R.E. Dave Chappelle. But I think the reality that we need all hands on deck to raise awareness of the experience of those who are marginalized because of gender identity is important. Toward that end, I already failed in this conversation. I should have led by saying, my name is Theo Foster, my pronouns are he, him, right? Which is to announce
it's
how—
written underneath you. So as long as everyone here can read, which maybe before the wine, yes. Now, not sure.
Before the wine, yes. After, maybe not.
Yeah.
But the other point is ableism, right? Like, that's one area in which I often fail. I have an older brother with Down syndrome, so I'm often thinking about the intersection of ability and not cognitive and physical. But, you know, on our social media accounts, when we post a picture, do we describe that picture in writing? So people who are using certain kind of text-to-speech technology can hear what everyone else is able to see, which is for folk, right, who are blind. So I think, you know, we have to do that work on a daily basis, that even if no, you know, folk we know of who are blind here, I'm sure in terms of our audience and radio in particular, right? We want to speak to people who are listening in particular.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think doing that work's important.
I would say to the privilege thing quickly, I would just say like, one of my biggest takeaways here is to try to figure out how to get to the people who are living my experience. And one of those is to figure out that the stories of the sort of heroes of movements from the past are sensationalized in positive ways. So you speak about was Celia, right?
Celia, yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that this activism, and I think it came up so often in sports with Colin Kaepernick, is like a martyr doesn't need to lose everything. When he got a Nike deal and everyone said, oh, he didn't mean what he did because he got money. What? You don't have to lose you don't have to lose your job and all your money to prove that you were worthy in what you were trying to accomplish. So I think there's a cleanness, there's a BuzzFeed top 5 list, click through to have your faith in humanity restoredness about society right now. And instead what we need to do is find some of those stories and tell them in completion, even if it's done in a way that appeals to people like me. Right? Here's a slideshow about Celia, or here's the actual ending to what happened to Rosa Parks. Like you'll never guess how this ends. Like for dumb shits who are like, ooh, how did it end? Oh no, cirrhosis of the liver. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like find a way to appeal to the way that people engage now that lifts up the heroes that they want and gives them the things they want, but also tells the complete story, because otherwise we're going to keep writing it the same way in the present and then revising it as a past, and we don't actually engage with current people who are doing that same work in ways that are meaningful and will change us now. And then we're just doing the same shit over and over and over again. So I would like to do that. And then as far as my own privilege is concerned, I do think like recognizing the ways that being a white woman in many spaces is a privilege, while also allowing for the fact that, yes, when a black man walks in the room, he can't take his skin off. When a woman walks in the room, she can't take her gender off. Yes. You know, we had this great dinner where this, 50 plus gay white man, cis man, said, listen, I've been with my partner for 20 years and I didn't get to marry him until 20 years in. But when I walk into a store, as far as people are concerned, I have the most privilege of anybody because they don't know I'm gay because I'm not wearing that. Yeah. And so I think like anybody who has any sort of recognition, whether that's not the highest level, but any level, to understand what it is to walk through the world and present anything that allows people to hate you or attack you or treat you as less than, and then care about whether that changes. Because a lot of people don't, because they haven't been forced to at least reconcile that.
Yeah, I mean, that's empathy, right? And I think that in an ideal world, we could communicate what it means to be a woman. I know that I'll never experience that reality to be femme or to be a woman in that way. So I don't necessarily have to empathize with those who do to know that their humanity matters. And that's I think how we build broad-based coalitions that demand not only Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter, Black trans lives matter, because their humanity matters.
We're just a human, right? Yeah.
Because you're a human.
Why, like, I have a daughter. That's how I know that people shouldn't be treated shitty. Well, you have a mom too. Yes, she's not that great. So, okay, we need to bring back Theodora because we are way behind time, and I hope people are still there. And I don't know because we're on the back end of this, so Twitch might have left us all behind to go play whatever you play on.
We don't care. We can post it later, and we can just have this conversation ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah, but I love the conversation because I always say, if you have not had the United States Supreme Court decide your privilege or your right, you are privileged. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's when you know. White men don't have to have people determine whether they have reproductive rights. They don't have anybody determining whether they get to vote. That's white privilege. And this conversation has been fascinating. And I know we're out of time, and I'm just going to be quiet and sit back.
No, you don't. You should. No, we're going to involve you in this because what we want to do. We were going to take questions, but unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to get to that. Well, there is no time limit, really. Like time is a flat circle, especially during quarantine. Yeah. I don't even know what month it is, but our producer, director, wine guy, music rep, Steve Smith, shout out to Steve Smith for helping organize this. He said, just keep it going. So we're going to keep it going. I don't care if anyone's watching because I'm enjoying it. You guys,
overtime.
I believe. Yeah, overtime pay. Let's do it. We're getting paid for this, right? I'm a white woman. I'm not showing up for anything I'm not getting paid for. Let's talk J.K. Rowling, because someone who's watching is interested.
Yes.
And did you guys know that J.K. Rowling's pseudonym for her other non-Harry Potter books happens to be the name of a man who invented conversion therapy for gay people? Isn't that such a crazy coincidence? Wow, what bad luck for her.
I mean, from what I've known, she's not really fucking with trans folk anyway.
No, that was my point. I was joking. It's not a coincidence. It's clearly intentional. Yeah. Very specific name, and there we go. My jokes are best when I have to explain them, so that's good. Dr. Foster,
I'm gonna go that way.
Yeah, can we talk about, because I'm sure as an academic you have a fascinating view of why it matters in some ways to be able to attach to what it is to be a woman, and also why it doesn't, because my strongest thought about the pushback against trans people is, if I don't know if you're a man or a woman, I don't know if I should pay you less, hire you for worse jobs, be offended if you hit on me, right? It's misogyny disguised as transphobia for the most part, in my opinion, or homophobia because you just realize you're attracted to someone and it's a man, or was a cis man who now identifies as. Yeah. So to me, I'm curious what you make of a straight, white, powerful woman like J.K. Rowling caring so much about the idea of what it is to be female.
Which is to say what it means to be a white female, I would say, in terms of gender, right? Mm-hmm. I think that the idea of normative gender is the history of slavery and colonialism. If we think about the theft of land, the theft of body, in the case of Celia, in the case of Sally Hemings, white femininity is structured by that history of violence as much as white masculinity is, which is to say normative gender roles, which is to say that Black folk are never fully normatively Black and man, Black and woman, such that cis-hetero Black relationships is also a struggle to be subject to the entitlements of gender that other people are as well. I know that can be confusing, but that's part of the reason why in many ways gender is policed more heavily in Black communities, because the consequence of being queer, non-normative, is so severe, right? Mm-hmm. So in the case of someone like J.K. Rowling, there are radical white feminists of the 1960s and 70s women's movement who do not accept or want trans women to be included in their horizon for liberation for women, right? And what gender is. So I think Rowling is simply trying to uphold normative gender roles from a certain white feminist perspective, that if we have no texture understanding of a long history of feminism and Black feminism in particular, then we might overlook the maneuvers that she's doing in this. Like, why is she so invested? Why are white men so invested? Why are Black men so invested in being, policing of who is and who is not man or woman fully? The consequences, the death of folk and the violence against folk like Cece McDonald, who comes to mind, who is somebody who's active in this group I mentioned before, Survived and Punished, right? Who survived a brutal attack, killed their assailant, and spent a year or two in jail in Detroit, right? The consequences of that logic are that violence that I think we often, J.K. Rowling, she's the author of Harry Potter. Who cares what she really thinks? It's like, no, her thinking is a form of violence, right? That legitimates that obscured reality of the death of trans folk, trans men.
And what's interesting too is the idea of the lived experience of what people perceive you as being more of an indicator of who you are than who you might be at. So Christina Carl is a MLB writer for ESPN, and she is a cis male trans woman who was on the MLB Writers Association of America and was in all of the clubhouses and locker rooms and press boxes as a man who knows baseball. Transitions, now is a woman, and as we all know, women don't know sports. It's just in our genes. We were born that way. We can't help it. So I asked her when she came on my podcast, well, how did they treat you when you came, if they didn't know that you were who you were before and had never met you. When you walk into those clubhouses and press boxes as a woman, how did they treat you? And she said, I couldn't tell whether to be offended or surprised and pleasantly pleased that they treated me like a woman, which meant they didn't think I knew anything and they talked over me.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, tell me everything. You've lived. She's unfortunately not Black. If she was Black, it would be the like quadfecta.
Oh.
Like, tell me every lived experience but it's fascinating, this idea that it doesn't even matter. And that's why J.K. Rowling is, I think, so dumb in her take on this, is that whatever your experience is based on perception, which is not the most important thing for your identity, but it does affect the way you are treated. So a woman is a woman based on how the world sees you, because gender is a construct anyway. So if Christina Carl walks in and you treat her like shit, even though she's on the Baseball Writers of America and has been pumping it forever, then that's because you think she's a woman and therefore knows nothing and should not be, and should be talked over and should be like, that's fascinating to me.
It is.
It
is. But that's the reality that we live in. And, you talked about the interconnectivity between race and feminism. And, I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but, feminism was a white woman issue. And Black women were kind of on the sideline of those issues. And that's why Alice Walker wrote a book talking about that marginalization. And so, I mean, what I think this movement can do is bring everyone together. Because as long as we are not privileged, Sarah, you're not privileged, Derrick, none of us are privileged, because we all have somebody challenging our existence. We should build coalitions to support each other. And when we do that, I think this movement can be real.
There's more of us than them. Theodora's Theodora's army. I'm in. I'm ready. Tell me where to report. Like, let's do this.
I think too. I think what's interesting about J.K. Rowling too, circling back, is there, and this will be we're not going to get into it today because I already know how long this can go. Is the idea of separating the artist from the art they create and how much that is informed by. And I think there's a lot of iterations of that conversation. So,
Episode 2.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Michael Jackson, I think, Woody Allen, J.K. Rowling.
we got a lot of right. But I do think that it is important, right, to not lionize people that we like. It's easy for us to do this, but we often will lionize people, because they've reached a modicum of success based on the metrics of what we, especially in this capitalistic society, based on that understanding of success in this capitalistic society, and say, oh, because they think these things, they intrinsically have a certain level of value, right? Yeah. We are adding value to these people who may not be in a position to talk about it. It's just like, I want people to speak out. I want people who are celebrities to speak out, but I also want them to be informed. Right. And thinking about what is the bar for that? Right. And then how much weight should we give to that? Right. Because that is how, like, do we want Dr. Foster talking about something?
No, or do we want J. Cole?
No, we do, but we got to find a way to give him a voice, which is to your point, like, right? And that's why the share the mic now was the important thing, because it was like, take all these people with incredible power and massive audiences and make them listen to someone who's informed. To your point, Derrick, it's really fascinating because someone like Chelsea Handler, who tries to be on the forefront of activism, has been called out multiple times for, like, you're just a white comedian. What the hell do you know? And she said, I don't know. Is my voice less important because I've become extremely successful at something? No, of course not. Right. Like, she's deserving. And if you earn it and you work for it, okay. But at the same time, someone like Steven Jackson, who's been on the forefront of conversations about George Floyd and is now sharing freaking anti-Semitism and Louis Farrakhan and Hitler-driven rhetoric, because he is not as informed on that, but because he's earned a voice on something else, then no, he doesn't automatically get our approval. So I think you're right. Like, we can't, there's this real quick aside. there's this idea, and it mostly pervades the idea of sexual assault, which is the just world ideology, which is that if you are a victim of something terrible, you must have provoked it in some way, because we don't want to believe we live in a world where you would get something bad to happen to you without deserving, which is partly the reason why when a black person is killed at the hands of the police, let's find out if they ever did anything wrong, right? It's that idea of like, we don't want to acknowledge that this could happen for no reason, but it happens, for instance, with something like Larry Nassar, who assaulted over 500 young Olympic gymnasts. Every single one of them, someone said, what could they possibly have done? And the answer was nothing, and they had nowhere to go because they were symbols of American greatness, and they were young white women, and no one could find something that they did wrong because they were like 12-year-old Olympians, right? Yeah. And so what happened was we had to finally face the idea that the just world ideology is a safe space to blame victims for what happens to them, instead of understanding the ways that we let institutions be held up because we're scared that they will be brought down, because that will mean a change for all of us. If the school that I went to is bad, I don't want to face that. If the church I went to is bad, if the military is bad, if any of these institutions are bad, then I have to acknowledge a drastic change that needs to take place, and that's very scary. So I'd rather say that one person was wrong. That happens across all things, whether that's, a racial injustice or sexual assault or whatever. But what it comes down to is this idea that, like, if a celebrity is famous, then they're probably good. Yeah. If you're rich, then you probably are good too, and smart, and we should listen to you. And that's not true at all. It's just a way that we convince ourselves that OJ didn't do it, and neither did Bill Cosby, because they got really rich and famous, so they're probably good people. No, it's just another way we convince ourselves that only good people should deserve great things, and that's clearly not true.
And usually it's actually quite the opposite, right? Like, in order to get there, like, the chances of you having to step on people, cause harm to other people in other groups is higher. Like, right? Like
yep,
it is actually a perversion.
Welcome to our political system. Good luck winning by the person who wants to help people. Yeah.
But see, like, an underside to that just world context is the category of innocence that is a much more 100%. Challenging concept to unsettle, that often black folk who are the victims of crimes are like, but he was unarmed, but he didn't move too fast, but he just did this. I think in a world in which we abolish prisons and police, in a world where transformative justice is a possibility, is a world in which criminals don't deserve to be punished, a la Amy Cooper, this birdwatcher situation, and Christian Cooper saying, you know what, I'm not going to participate in the NYPD pursuing charges for her, because for me, I don't want to feed that beast. I can't speak to Christian Cooper's politics around abolition, but I can say, as much as we might want punitive revenge for the victims of someone like these quote unquote Karens, I think we have to really interrogate, what that system means and how innocence is always forestalled for those women victims of sexual violence, for those black folks, the victims of anti-black violence. How is the law going to uphold justice in that context, given the history from Celia in 1855 to Centoya Brown, Marissa Alexander, and countless other black women who are punished for surviving, right?
Right. Well, and to your point, if punishment is performative and not restorative, then it doesn't serve a purpose, and that's why our prisons are so full, because we're not actually seeking to save people from whatever they grew up in or lacked or why they ended up creating crime. We're just wanting to prove that we're going to be tough on people who do bad things, but we don't get
to want to make a little money on them in the same time.
And make money, because prison
and make money on
it. And make money, and we all know that. But not everybody knows that, sadly. But no, I do think that, like, the idea that we've been taught a million different things about why we have police and prisons, if we get to the bottom of why they exist in the first place, we'll know that it's wrong, but we'll also realize that we're not actually punishing for the sake of repairing. We're punishing so that we can point to things that we've done to make bad people go away, and we don't actually solve any of the reasons that they were bad in the first place.
Word.
Or that bad things happen in our community.
I have to say, you got it.
Yes.
All right, so I guess we're down to action items, because we could keep talking forever, myself included. And I apologize for interrupting. That's like my job as an annoying sports person, is like to bait stuff and then like jump in and be like, "You're wrong, Bayless." But I still tried my best to avoid.
We've loved you, Sarah. We've loved you.
Again, family of lawyers. You understand how it is, Theodora. You got to get your word in edgewise. Okay. So we've got to a lot of this, but let's talk about, and this is most important to me, and I can't see the Twitch, so I hope there's still people around. Okay. When I went to an event a couple years ago and it was about New Year's resolutions, the person said, whatever you're resolving to do is not a resolution, it's an intention. And that intention needs to come from within, but you also need to be held accountable. And to me, that's the biggest difference when you get something done that you've always meant to do, is whether you ask somebody else to hold you accountable for it. So instead of just saying what we plan to do, what action items we intend to do, we are going to also say that we intend to ask someone else to hold us accountable. So whoever's watching, if there's anyone other than the four of us, and otherwise it'll just be the four of us and Steve and Mo.
That's cool.
Which is fine. Whatever you decide to do, we want you to write it down and then email someone close to you and tell them your intention and ask them to hold you accountable to it. Whether that's put a reminder in your calendar once a month that says, hey, just checking in, have you done X or Y? Also, post your intention to one or more of your social media accounts. Right now, when you decide which of these action items you're going to do, post it to somewhere and ask that the people who follow you and are friends and care for you will ask you about it and follow up if you're doing it. And then send an email to Derrick. He's going to give us all a friendly reminder every once in a while to follow through on our intentions. If you want to opt in on wine-related emails, we're going to give Derrick some shine as well, because why the hell not? If you want to get him to tell you about his wine shop and the best wines in Theodora's Wine Club and how to take a class from Dr. Foster virtually, because everyone's going to be, because not the hell chance we're ever going to be in classrooms again for a while, then all that can happen. And then he can send you a message that links to my radio show, and then we can all like masturbate on each other.
Yes.
And the point is, whatever all these things that you're doing, we want you to do those things, okay? So let's talk about some of the opportunities that we have to be actionable about our intentions. And one of those is the easy one we started with, which is support Black-owned businesses. There are plenty of resources that will tell you. I'll tell you that on Amaze in Wicker Park, the line has been out the door since the first day that someone released a Black-owned businesses list, and it has not stopped since. And on Juneteenth, it was like, you're never gonna get served. Like, they're not going to be open late enough. Like, why are you waiting in line?
And you know, yesterday was Blackout Day 2020, a day of solidarity, advocating for equality, social justice, challenging Black people, people of colors, and all supporters to buy anything Black.
Why do we make it a day? Let's make it a month. It's June.
Everyone
write it down. Everyone write it down once a week. Here's one actionable item. Once a week, you should go to, get takeout from, order from a Black-owned business of some kind. I promise you there's a restaurant nearby. There's a winery. There's a something that you can, there we go. There's a something you can go to.
It is Black-owned, Black Cafe.
I can't speak for every city. I know Chicago, it'll work. Good luck in some other places, but find something online and buy an early birthday present for someone, and then you'll have it done and planned ahead. So that's a great one. Supporting the people that do work within your community. For instance, today I messaged people about My Block, My Hood, My City, which is one of my favorite organizations in Chicago. They're doing a virtual 5K in different neighborhoods around the city that you might not have gone to. You sign up for it. They assign you a neighborhood. You're supposed to do the 5K, walking, running, however, in that neighborhood to introduce you to a new space and also to donate a certain amount of money. So I'm trying to get some friends of mine to come with me on a Sunday in August and walk in a neighborhood we haven't been to and also raise money for a cause that's doing great things. Find something local that is doing the work on the ground, that is much more invested and educated than you'll ever be, and give them your money because they're going to use it well.
Yes. Yes.
Derrick.
Shout out to Asada's Daughters, who is here local in Chicago. My Block, My City, My Hood.
Block, My Hood, My City is awesome. Jamal Cole, he's amazing.
But yeah, I agree with this. I don't have anything else to add into action plans. I mean, if you're in Chicago, you know, the best way to support Black business is to support this Black business. You know what I mean? And guess what? I know exactly. And I will be sure to take that dollar and circulate it, that Black dollar many, many times over. But yeah, I think that I love that banner. I love it. That's fantastic.
Tell us very quickly about 1340 BWS. Tell us about it.
So 1340 BWS is a wine shop, or what we call in Chicago a slashy. So we do retail and on-premise drinking. So you can have a glass of wine. Right now through coronavirus, it only can be like 6 of y'all in here because, you know, I don't trust the people right now and I don't want that Rona. But you can have a glass of wine here in the shop, wine, beer, spirit, or you can buy it and take it home. And then we teach classes, the whole nine. So
Tell us where you are.
1340 West Madison is where we're located. Hence the name 1340. We try to make it simple for you guys.
And if we search that name, we're gonna find it.
Yeah, if you search 1340 BWS, you will find us in Chicago. If you search it for another city, good luck.
And I will say they also carry Theopolis Vineyard.
They do.
Yes, we do.
He already went to the manager and he asked about it like a good old Karen. Okay.
I personally Karened the shit out of
Theopolis. Okay, one other thing you can do that's worthwhile is commit to learning about lower ballot issues, because sometimes the very biggest changes are going to come from judges and prosecutors and all those folks. So actually, unlike me, and I'm going to own myself on this one, on voting day, I look for a website that just sums up everybody's position. And then if I can't find it, I vote for people with women's names.
Ooh.
Okay. Anyway, that's not a great rule of thumb, but I'm going to do better.
I mean, there's worse things. There are definitely worse things to do, though. I like at least you get the summary.
Too, which is, again, it's not a great way to go, but I'm just guessing. So from now on, I'm going to do that work before I'm walking to my voting place, which is like a block away. I'm going to look up and learn about lower ballot issues and vote on judges and prosecutors, etc. Also, if you're in a position to hire, are you hiring Black people, Indigenous people? Are you hiring people of color? Are you hiring women? Are you making your place diverse? And if you're not in a position to hire, could you influence the hiring people to make your place a little more diverse? That's really important. And could you speak up on behalf of Black people, Indigenous people of color, women at your place of business, so that Pepsi doesn't have an ad where Kendall Jenner is solving racism by handing a cup of Pepsi? Like, someone could have been in that room, and it could have been you, and you could have been the person that's like, hey, I know I'm just a white lady, but like, this seems bad. So can we do that? That's a good one.
I mean, there are tons of Black PR firms that are big and small. There are tons of, I think if we focus our energy on creating a more diverse, and I mean, diverse is a buzzword, but if you create an environment where you're working with people who don't look like you, come from different backgrounds from you, high tide, raise all ships. Now, then you get, like, it's funny because who was talking about? I think Bomani Jones was talking about how, like, a lot of times, like, coaches, when we're talking about the Rooney Rule, right? Hiring is often done ignorant of the actual financial gain you can make, right? Hiring people who don't look like you allows you to be able to support and to be able to market to other people because they have a better understanding than you do. This very vague and general.
No, you're right. It's the idea of, it's not a charitable effort. It actually makes your business better. And as soon as you stop flipping it as the idea that you're raising up someone who's undeserving, and rather that you're creating a space that's going to function better and get you out of massive issues and also allow you to appeal to more and more people and bring them in, then all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to a world where you're appealing to people of all races and genders instead of limiting yourself.
Yeah, and I just want to add, everyone needs to have a diversity and inclusion policy and practice communicated throughout the organization, making sure that everyone in the organization knows that you will not tolerate racism against people of color or gender, and actually have training on unconscious bias and reducing microaggressions. That's the only way we can make change in corporate America.
Well, and I love that Steve, our music producer, wine producer, director, whatever, just put up there, this does not preclude qualification, meaning you're not hiring someone who's not qualified. You are hiring them because they are qualified and because it actually serves you to have a more diverse room, which has been proven out over 1 million different terrible snafus and or issues, and also has been proven out many times when you never heard about it because something great happened because they involved diversity within the room that they were in.
100%.
All right, are we going to wrap this?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, there you go, Steve. Clear diversity inclusion. Wow, this is like the most fun thing. I wonder if we just said weird stuff if he would have to put it up. Like if you're thank you so much for joining our talk on penises and cotton candy. Like, is that
Where's this coming?
actually that was
Probably best.
that would be like someone trying to transcribe a Trump speech. It's like some weird shit about penises and cotton candy. I don't know. Fact check it yourself. We're tired over here. Okay. I think we're gonna wrap up. This was like really fun. Should we just do this all the time? Because what else are we gonna do? I leave my house.
It's COVID-19.
It is. I hope it's making us be a very captive audience where we have interesting conversations because we can't leave our house and drink more. We can drink at home though, which is good.
Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much. So much. You are a fantastic co-host. Theodora, you are an icon to me. I know I've said this to you once or twice before, but you are amazing, absolutely fabulous. And probably the least cool thing about you is you make one of my favorite wines of all time. I think that's
I can't wait to try it. I'm gonna go carrying my ass into that store and ask them
They keep
at a discount.
And you know what? We'll do a download. I keep a stash of 2013 for wine club members.
Okay,
but I'm gonna
man.
get some.
Listen,
Okay.
I might be Rona-ing my ass out to Napa for my birthday this summer. I'm gonna wear 8 masks. And I'm gonna come straight to your place.
Not Napa.
Okay, I'm gonna come straight to you. Is what's gonna happen.
Okay.
Derrick, thank you for spurring this on. This video is going to be available if you missed the beginning,
Yes.
and also the links to the places that we suggest that you might donate, and all the different Twitter and Instagrams for all the smart people. I'm probably going to have Dr. Foster on my podcast because I want to hear more from him. But yeah, what are we forgetting? Anything?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
And first of all, I just want to let you know, Theo, this is the first time I've called you Dr. Foster in public, and it feels weird. I can't wait till we get off this so I can just call you Theo and say ye all day, because this is not, I don't know if I like this anymore.
Yeah, no, Derrick's a good friend, and I appreciate being able to speak with a really excellent group of folk in Sarah Spain and Theodora. The last little plug I throw in there is, again, For Assata's Daughter is a good place to donate your money. An excellent organization that supports young Black women in the city of Chicago. The Chicago SNCC History Project, which is an educational nonprofit that supports the kind of political education about this history that pushes back on that whitewash history in the city of Chicago.
Ooh, I
It's
like
really
that.
important. And Survive and Punish, which seeks to end the criminalization of women and trans folk who are punished for surviving. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to.
I'm going to get all those resources from you because I want to share them in an easy to access place. And then I'm on the board for Embark Chicago, which serves underserved kids across the South and West Sides predominantly to open them up to experiences across the city so that they learn about opportunities and have hope about what they can become outside of the small areas in which they grow up. So let's get all of our resources together. And this is like, if I ever watched any of the Avengers, this would be it. There'd be way too many Black Panthers and Wonder Woman. We don't have any Chris Evans types or whatever Chris it is. But I feel good about this. It's really hard to hang up. You hang up. No, you hang up. No.
No, you don't.
No, this was awesome. Thanks to, if there's anyone left. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Derrick for getting this going. Thank you to Steve and Mo and everybody on the back end. And maybe we'll do this again if people liked it. But yeah, we'll get together some sort of final doc with all the information and we'll send it to whoever is interested. So make sure Steve, if you want to throw up Derrick's email one more time, we could at least start there.
Shoot my email. And then what we'll do is in the doc, we'll have all of your contact information along with all the cool information that we got today too. I love the resources page. So perfect.
Cool. Awesome.
Love you guys. Peace out.
Awesome. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Yeah.
Cheers.